This is episode 105 of the Death to Tyrants podcast.
The crushing weight of the tyrant's passage had left nothing unmarked.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram wrath. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquids, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of...
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Yes. Welcome back, you guys. Once again, this is the Death to Tyrants podcast. As always, I am your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, coming to you out of Austin, Texas, where we get red-pilled today. We talk about taking that red pill. Probably most of you know what that means. If you don't know what it means, well, maybe you're about to be red-pilled. Basically, well, you know what? I don't want to ruin the surprise. We get into all of this today with my guest, Tho Bishop of the Mises Institute. Other than just specifically being red-pilled, I want to tell you that we do talk about libertarianism, the Trump movement, populism, Rothbard, Mises, all of the stuff that we love talking about on the show. Of course, the current lockdown mess as well. Tulsi Gabbard comes up, Hermann Hoppe, and this is just a very fun chat, and I think you guys will enjoy it. Let me tell you real quick about Tho Bishop. He is an assistant editor for Mises Wire, which can be found over there, of course, at Mises.org. Prior to working for the Mises Institute, he served as Deputy Communications Director for the House Financial Services Committee. His articles have been featured in The Federalist, The Daily Caller, and Business Insider. He's here with us today on Death to Tyrants. Tho Bishop, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello, Bud. Great to be with you.
Yeah, man. Well, this is my first time to have you on, and before we jump in to the topic at hand, I wanted to ask you about what you do over there at the Mises Institute. What work do you do for them?
So I'm an assistant editor with the website, and again, it's just a tremendous honor to be able to work for an institute that has played such a profound role in my own education. You know, I think we have one of the best missions out there and provide some of the best content. What I do is I write articles for the website, I help manage social media. One of the best things I do is we have a lot of young scholars that come through our programs, a lot of our young fellows. The talent pool of the Austrian school is deep and growing every year. And so I love nothing more than trying to find outlets for our younger scholars to get articles out there on websites and trying to find new ways of getting the ideas of the Austrian school and Rothbardian style libertarianism out to the masses any way possible.
What's your experience been like overall there? Because I think a lot of us, well, especially myself, if I think of getting to be around Lou Rockwell and Jeff Deist and Mark Thornton and David Gordon and these people, I'd be speechless, to be quite honest with you. What's that experience been like for you?
It's just a dream come true. Just the first day I walked through those doors. For one, anyone that hasn't actually physically come to the Institute, our on-campus presence is as great as the website itself. We've got Rothbard's library. We've got the typewriter that Human Action was typed up on. We've got all sorts. We're a very active archive where Patrick Newman in particular keeps finding, just like Murray Rothbard's economic Tupac. We're still cranking out incredible content that keeps being discovered. So being able to interact with these people and particularly in the last few years, I don't think that there has been a better voice in the libertarian movement than Jeff Deist. I'm taking for what it's worth. I'm an employee of his. I've got my own biases there, but I'm just always, every time we have an event and he takes the stage, I think the way that he is able to deliver these ideas in a way that's not just, there's a lot of depth there, but the relevance with the landscape that we've been seeing, both in the U.S. internationally. It's just an absolute honor to be able to be around these minds, particularly in times like this. Our traffic the last few months has just been incredible. Unfortunately, it's a shame that it takes a time of crisis for people to look at these ideas, but it's just, it's great to be working for an institution that actually has a lot of the answers out there when it's clear that so many of our institutions are completely brainless. So again, and again, the great thing too is that the big names are fantastic, but it's the up and coming talents out there. People like Patrick Newman, people like Carl Frederick Israel, who's a professor out in Germany. One of my buddies, Tate Segley, he just finished his PhD at George Mason. It's the young scholars that it takes a while for them to build up their name out there. Being able to have beers with them at Rothbard Village next to the Institute and interact with them. It's a great way of avoiding the black pill because again, when you see these people out there in action, knowing that we've got these people coming up through the pipeline, it's a very exciting time, I think, for the Austrian school.
Why are Mises Institute libertarians so much better than the run-of-the-mill libertarian?
It helps when you're standing on the shoulders of giants already. I think that Ludwig von Mises is one of the great badasses of history. When I'm talking to normies and I explain exactly what it is, what I do, I try to explain that, Ludwig von Mises is, what people imagine like Nikola Tesla is, right? He was a revolutionary thinker that brought into, the science of economics, a revolutionary way of looking about it with, that praxeology, logical framework, that focus on human action, and plus his own, his own narrative, right? This is a guy that wasn't simply an ivory tower academic isolated from the world as it is. No, this guy was a World War I soldier who fought off invading Russians and then was able to serve in the Austrian economic ministry and then got kicked out of there because he kept standing up for all of these these economic policies that the government was trying to increase, this form of war socialism, when the government kept trying to take over more and more of the economy during World War I, because he refused to bend the knee and simply go along with whatever the government wanted, like every other person in that council did. He said, hell no. And they sent him back out to the front lines into the most treacherous territory where he thought he was going to die. It's one of those stories. Everyone knows, a lot of people in our orbit, they know of, Ludwig von Mises storming out of the Mont Pelerin Society and calling Milton Friedman a socialist. But I think that in particular is he lived to this. Do not give in to evil, but proceed ever more boldly against it. It wasn't just a motto for him. it was the way he lived his life. And so being able to draw from that human narrative, and then someone like Murray Rothbard, who was just an incredible genius, not just as an economist, but a historian, as a political philosopher, but also a political strategist. His understanding that this is one of the things that frustrates me so often with libertarians, and that's something that I think that the Just and Amash campaign suffers from as well, is that we're so focused on trying to appeal to these intellectuals in society, ignoring that there are real systemic incentive structures that cloud them from ever really embracing these ideas of liberty and free markets that to us seem so obvious. And so, the fact that Rothbard understood that, just the same way that if you were a capitalist designing a product for the market, you have to build a product with the public as a whole, as they are in mind. That was his approach to politics. We shouldn't be afraid of populism. We shouldn't be afraid of, tapping into the fact that people's emotions, that the people should be angry because the state is ripping us off. And I think that, the fact that we have someone of Rothbard's intellect and intellectual accomplishments who understood that political strategy, and it's something I think Ron Paul did such a great job of capitalizing on during his political career. Rothbard gets a lot of hate from it, right? There's a lot of Rothbard haters in the intellectual world, and then Hoffa, he's got even more. But I think that their unique contributions that again are very unpopular within certain orbits. I think those are it is where they are at their least popular that they are at their best. And so being able to build off of those specific strains of libertarian thought, I think really give our camp a big advantage out there, which again, why I have the best job in the world.
Right. Yeah. Was there a special moment that pulled you into the libertarian world that you can remember?
I think, and I'm definitely a child of the Ron Paul era. I grew up as a pretty normie conservative. I was a big nerd, so I'd sneak in a hand radio and I'd listen to Sean Hannity on my high school bus rides home. I was terrible. But then when you saw the financial crisis and Republicans understand the marketplace, but yet the Bush administration finds ourselves in a massive economic crisis. That's when I kind of realized that no, I have to kind of think outside the box here and kind of learn. I actually have to learn economics myself rather than just trusting experts. Like I kind of thought I thought everything else was going to set on autopilot like that. And so seeing someone like Ron Paul, who did such a good job of communicating these ideas, and then you go a little bit deeper and you realize that these aren't just bumper sticker slogans. That there's a whole vibrant school of thought here, and this beautiful logic to everything, and this the historical narratives of Mises and all these things. Once I started tapping into that, I could never go back. And I tried to read. I read Milton Friedman. There's a lot of good contributions there. I even read Paul Krugman author stuff looking for these answers. But the more that I read Rothbard, the more sense it made. And then one of the big moments for me was that I knew this libertarian stuff makes sense. But it was reading Brian Doherty's Radicals for Capitalism, which I think does a great job of outlining a lot of different factions within the movement. Yes. Even though that there's some people that said that book is not the most favorable to Rothbard and Rothbardian Austrians, that book helps seal the deal for me entirely, because again, seeing the differences over time, I think that Rothbard was usually in the better camp there, and so that made made it easy to go all in. But yeah, it was really the 2008 financial crisis that Ron Paul's campaign that really brought me to where I am now.
All right. Well, I want to get into taking the red pill. It's a great topic, and there's some irony in it, of course, in that only those who have quote unquote been red pilled usually know what it means. And for the listener who's going, wait a second, I'm one of those who doesn't know what this means, but I think I'm informed and everything. What is your definition of that, what it means to be red-pilled?
I think it's kind of within the Michael Malice framework of recognizing that the agenda that so much of the way that we're taught to think about society and politics, is all built around kind of this common leftist progressive mindset, and realizing just how fabricated a lot of these consensuses really are. And recognizing that there's truths out there that a lot of the institutions that we have, that there's truths that the media doesn't want you to know, there's truths that academics don't want you to know, there's truths that Hollywood doesn't want you to know, and kind of being able to see past this constructed zeitgeist and tapping into some of these alternative schools of thought. I think that's way overly wordy. Recognizing that you're not being told the truth by the people that you're supposed to respect, I think might sum it up more succinctly. But again, just recognizing that there's a lot that we're taught that is wrong and in some cases outright evil.
Do you think Rothbard was one of the biggest red pillars in the libertarian world?
Absolutely. And he also, I think that he took a lot of joy in doing it. If you look at his history of political strategy with his alliances, again, a lot of people attack Rothbard for his alliances out there. But, I think it's, for one, I think it's very easy to say as a libertarian today, where, for one, we have Facebook, right? We're friends with, we got thousands of friends all around the country and all around the world that, we can share memes with, and that we have this common libertarian language, so that, we could talk about taxation and stuff amongst ourselves. If you think about where Rothbard was in the 50s and 60s and 70s, for one, early on, the American libertarian movement, is pretty new in the grand scheme of things. The 50s era with Rand and Rothbard and what Fee was able to do and Henry Hazlitt. It's a pretty new movement, relatively in the grand scope of history. So he was just desperate to try to get the word out there. And if he saw that there was opportunities with the new left during the 60s and a lot, especially with the focus on the Vietnam War. He's okay, here's what we agree with. And then I'm going to try to drag you away from your socialist beliefs by simply trying to highlight the hypocrisy with your beliefs, or going in the 90s, where he sees the Pat Buchanan wing as the growing anti-war wing in mainstream political thought. Again, there's plenty of things that Pat Buchanan has said that I don't agree with, but recognizing that in order to actually persuade others, we have to find common areas of agreement, and then understanding the importance of being able to communicate our core foundational motivating beliefs to those people who aren't there yet. I think that it's almost a duty as a proud libertarian ideologue. And again, I think that's one of the issues I have now with a lot of the libertarian conversation out there is that we get politically autistic.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is that when we're so focused on, taking pride in kind of our own logical consistency and our own purity, failing to recognize the importance of persuading people that aren't there yet. And I think that, I think Rothbard is one of the best out there. And again, he's one of the best models to follow in terms of how to communicate with others.
What moments in recent history, let's say late 70s onward, do you view as red-pilling groups of people? What moments pop in your mind?
I think it's times where people, where the state blunders so spectacularly that it causes people to wake up and realize that, what we're told to trust can't be trusted. In the 60s, it was definitely the Vietnam era. I think it was a massive red pill for a lot of people. If you go back, you can read a lot of the anti-war movement on the right. A lot of it was doubting FDR and questioning the official narrative on Pearl Harbor and things like that. I think the Iraq War, for my generation, it got to one point, to a certain point where, I went from, being a Sean Hannity, Iraq War, this is our duty to go save the Iraqis, to recognizing that, what the hell are we doing here? This is an absolute travesty. That was a big development in getting me towards the Ron Paul direction. The financial crisis, when the global financial consensus is completely wrong. And I think I'm noticing it right now with a lot of, boomer Trump types here locally in a very red state. People are furious at the lockdowns because of the coronavirus. They're furious that the government, again, a Republican-controlled state even, that is not nearly as bad as, say, Michigan or New York or California or some of these others. They're absolutely furious at DeSantis for shutting down their businesses. So again, I think it's the best. I think those radical red pills are when they realize that you have to always question and, if not outright, distrust your government. And luckily, government provides many examples on a seemingly daily basis to try to get normal people to that position.
Where do you think the Trump moment of 2006, him winning the election and the subsequent things that have gone on? Because you mentioned there's Trump kind of voter boomers that you've noticed getting red pill over this stuff. My father is exactly one of I would call a Trump voter boomer, and he's texted me throughout the last few years, like all of us. And this is a guy that was a George Bush voter, et cetera, like you mentioned, a Sean Hannity fan. And I remember him texting me a few months ago saying, the best people in Congress are Rand Paul and Mike Lee.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I don't know what Trump's doing to get people to think that, but that is a silver lining I will take any day of the week. But even the Russiagate stuff, all of this seems to have wakened some people up, almost to where, if you include now the lockdown issues, I'm starting to see a distrust of the police forces from some people in the Trump world. Are you seeing that as well?
Absolutely. I'm not going to do one better than your father's text messages. There's an attorney in the area who I have a lot of respect for. He's not a Rothbardian libertarian, but he's a very good guy. He's very motivated by a true sense of justice. He was a Rick Santorum supporter in 2012. Since about 2017 and a lot of this Russiagate stuff, he's out there on Facebook talking about we need to abolish the FBI.
Wow.
You have people talking of, openly, when the fact that Trump has normalized the concept of the deep state. We have gone from something that was, only literally talked about on Alex Jones's show to something where Sean Hannity himself is talking about the deep state war on Trump on Fox News. This is great. I mean, I think that there's plenty of, most of what Trump does policy-wise is bad, right? That goes without saying. But what Trump has done in undermining both the left view of a sacred president, and the deification of the state, where we now have, Gavin Newsom, trying to work in the phrase California as a nation state, and just about any major statement he has going out there. But even to the right, where they recognize that Trump is their champion, right or wrong, Trump is their champion. Any Republican that is against Trump, they instantly doubt their motivations. This is, and that any institution that is looking to actively undermine Trump can't be trusted. I think that has done more to, and it's kind of a shame in a way that so many of the establishment Republicans kind of got in line, right? Because like that, I think I would have caused even more friction in a good way for our side. But basically, if you are an establishment Republican not willing to bend the knee to Trump, then you can't be trusted at all. Whereas, again, Mitt Romney is now enemy number one to Republicans.
Yes.
Again, now, it's a start. There's plenty of people say, oh, well, they're just out there because they're Trump cultists. Like, I'll take a Trump cultist over someone that believes that establishment Republicanism and the technocratic elite of, as long as it comes from the Heritage Foundation, is going to give us a good government. I'd much rather take people that have this loyalty to this, our shit poster in chief over and this belief in a respectable, expert-driven government. I think this is a good counter-reaction to a lot of the progressive era of the 20th century and early 2000s.
Yeah, no doubt. And the LP, the official LP, seems to not see that. And that's frustrating, especially when you have people like Amash that they're pushing. But certainly the chair right now, I remember a recent quote on Twitter. The LP quoted Trump saying that calling out the stuff I love, honestly, calling out Don Lemon and I don't know if it was Brian Williams or these talking heads basically saying how stupid they are, which is something that is a red pill in itself for a lot of people. And here's the LP saying this is the kind of a personal attacks that we shouldn't have in the Oval Office. Right. And it's like, you're attacking some of the best aspects of him. You don't say a word about the war on Yemen, though. That's interesting. Right. And I feel like there's been this weird urge for certain people within the Libertarian Party to almost have this naughty eye looking over to neocons and never Trumpers like Bill Kristol. And have you noticed that?
Oh, absolutely. There was somebody who's a big wig at Cato, has been there for a long time. He retweeted some blue check mark quoting Trump when it was Trump at his best, right? George W. Bush goes out there saying that, this time of crisis, we need to just unify the country. It's completely unoffensive stuff. I mean, drivel, but completely unoffensive. It wasn't a particularly vicious barb against Trump. And Trump goes out there saying, where was George W. Bush talking about unity when I was being impeached, right? Right. Again, in the grand scheme of Trump moments, this was hardly the most obscene. But some blue check mark was quoting this, and this Cato guy quotes this saying, I would gladly trade more left-wing, slightly more left judges from the Biden administration to go through another 4 years like this.
Wow.
And so this is their priority. They care more about the president of the United States saying nice things about George W. Bush than they do about a leftist activist judicial system. There's plenty of Trump justice nominees that are going to be bound to drug war and things like this. So it's fine. But a lot of one of the big impacts is putting more originalist judges throughout the federal judicial system. And while a lot of them are not libertarians, they are a lot better than the alternative.
Yes.
That are explicitly left-wing activists. And so again, that is the priority. The question is, who do you care more about being respected by? A DC cocktail party or the audience of the Alex Jones show?
Right.
And it's like, look, there's plenty of Alex Jones people that I don't we wouldn't want to socialize with on a normal basis. But those people are a lot better than your average bar in DC. But if you're more concerned about being respected, by the powerful, and for one, that sort of strategy, that sort of focus is a great way to make sure that the libertarian message is politically sterile.
Yes.
Because those are not the people that are going to bring us liberty. It is the masses rising up, realizing that we are being ripped off by the feds to give us liberty. Goes throughout the history of America, right? I mean, the American Revolution. After we won the war, it was farmers and militia members pushing back on these state governments that are now trying to put in place the taxes to levels that the British couldn't. It was those people, the equivalent of the armed protesters in Michigan that Amash poo-pooed. Those are the people that actually were standing up to tyranny. It wasn't the high and lofty scholars. And again, I think this is one of the great flaws of libertarianism. And again, it is this explicit hostility towards populism and this fear of kind of emotional appeals that I think is very counterproductive and outright dangerous. And it doesn't work. And if we don't learn from this, the fact that we saw the flaccid Rand Paul campaign of 2016, where he was trying to play gatekeeper for the RNC and attacking Trump for not, how dare Trump be in this Republican debate for not promising to endorse a Republican nominee that's not himself? Your own father wouldn't have done that. Right. So, and it was surprise, that strategy, that gave Rand a worse performance in 2016 than Ron had in 2008. It doesn't work. And if we don't learn from these lessons, if we don't realize, how we can actually win people over en masse, the libertarian movement is not going to have the traction that we desperately need, particularly now where we're going to have to rebuild a lot after the coronavirus and the government response to it.
I feel like the left has become more blue-pilled in the last, 4 years. Maybe it's just because of the way Trump's kind of ripped the Band-Aid off of everything that seemed like go along to get along before. But things like WikiLeaks, which I consider a giant red pill for many people, they were kind of heroic to a lot of leftists until he went and gave the world some nasty facts about Hillary Clinton, and in their mind, helped her lose the election. And then, of course, they start saying that, well, WikiLeaks is from Russia and trying to make these ridiculous connections. Have you noticed that as well? Does the left seem almost worse off than they were pre-Trump?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's understandable to a certain extent because the left got used to winning, right? I mean, there's not many major political battles. They might have had some speed bumps along the way, but for the most part, the left won most of the policy battles of the 20th century.
Yes.
And then to lose to Trump, who everyone thought was a joke, to lose to Trump, who they thought was just so obviously beyond the pale. I think it perhaps more than anything else, it made them lose trust in the American democratic process. Now, of course, a lot of them, it's like some of them, so many of them rationalized they needed Trump to have benefited from some grand Russian conspiracy, where $200,000 in Facebook ads completely took over the American political system. They had to rationalize some sort of out because otherwise you'd have to reckon with the fact that the majority of the population, or of course, they'll be big to point out, the Electoral College doesn't actually represent the majority. Fine. That the rules of the game that the public, that they weren't nearly as popular as they thought they were. That being on the right side of history isn't enough. And then I think this is a very promising. I think this is a good thing. It goes back to Gavin Newsom's say. If Trump is somehow managed to pull off a re-election, I think that the conditions are set for the left in a lot of blue states to seriously look at, if not outright secession, at least a lot of the nullification and modern federalist approaches to things that people like Michael Bolton and the 10th Amendment Center have been talking about for a long while. And then I think this crisis, and if we're looking for silver linings, and I think we need them to avoid taking the black pill. The fact that we've seen such a state-led response, I think is a good thing because I think it normalizes, helps normalize this decentralist approach to politics in a way that could be beneficial. And of course, the great say, heads they lose, or heads we win, tails they lose. If Biden ends up being the president, then you're going to have half the country convinced that this whole thing was a pandemic, designed to undermine the economy and a Chinese plot to take down their champion, which might help fuel red state escalation in the red state decentralization late too. So again, it's there's a lot of reasons to be concerned about the short term. There's a lot of really bad policies out there. There's going to be a lot of pain. But just in terms of the political conversation and kind of this march towards the sort of radicalism needing for breaking up the status quo, I do think there's some positives out there if we look for them.
What are your thoughts on Tulsi Gabbard? I assume, like many of us, there was some hope that she would possibly red pill some people on the left and showing that, Democrats really don't care about war. And then the rug was pulled out from under everything. What are your thoughts on Tulsi?
I have a tremendous amount of respect for Tulsi. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting that she caught on to during her campaign is focusing on one of the priorities that Michael Malice talks about on a daily basis on Twitter, which is the insidiousness of the corporate press.
Yes.
She I don't know if it's because she started following him on Twitter or what, but she started making her points at the end really focused on the corporate press is trying to is the true great threat from democracy. Because how can we have a system of the people if the institutions that we are depending upon to get our news aren't willing to look at aren't really to actually give you the information you need to make these decisions. So I think that's great. Again, I know she's got all sorts of bad economic ideas. I know there's plenty of things out there that I disagree with. That's fine. So she also had, I don't think that she got nearly enough credit from libertarians for some of her positions on like religious freedom, yes. Which coming from a proud progressive, I don't think that she was nearly as universalistic in her view of politics as a lot of your standard Democrats. I got a lot of flack from my Libertarian Party friends because I was saying if you're the LP and you're looking for a actual politician to represent your party, I'd have a lot more faith in the message that Tulsi Gabbard can deliver, really focusing on war, focusing on the press, focusing on the corruption of DC, than someone like Amash, who obviously could write a great essay about Hayek's ideas for liberty, but I don't think communicate in a way that really exploits the lack of trust that so many Americans are feeling about the political status quo. And I think it's a message that just doesn't resonate nearly as much as someone who understands the true horrors of war and made that her real motivating force throughout her campaign.
Yeah, well put. I actually thought when she first kind of jumped into the race to become the Democratic nominee, I started hearing her and thinking, this might be the girl or the person that could beat Donald Trump from their side. And I'm biased towards the anti-war message. I still stand by 2008 and 2012. I definitely thought Ron Paul was the only candidate that would have beat Barack Obama. Yep. Because like Scott Horton always talks about, we can, if you're principled in our message, you can attack the left from the left and win, and then attack the right from the right and win as well. I think the lockdown warriors, and this might be putting it lightly, I think they may end up in the same dark place in history as the folks that sold us the WMD lies, because the type of damage that did was, we're still involved in Iraq over there, and it's long lasting for decades. And I suspect this lockdown stuff could be that same way as well. Do you think that could be the case, that these people pushing it, not only the governors and politicians, but just the loud, I hope that it's the vocal minority that's doing this, but I see it everywhere on social media. You're a grandma killer. How dare you want to go to work? What are your thoughts on that?
No, when this first happened, I was really concerned that this would accelerate a lot of the political victories on the left, because It's understandable that in a time of crisis that you're looking for comfort, you're looking for security, you're looking to be taken care of. And so I thought that, this might help push that, make that last little push for a lot of the even more socialist approaches to public policy than we have now. I'm starting to doubt, to question that, because even though we got our Trump bucks, securing the bag with the stimulus package, and there might be some more. More often than I'm seeing is this backlash, and I think one of the great aspects of this is that since Trump went so heavy on a state by state approach, I understand he talked a big game about I've got the ultimate authority and I can do whatever I want. Trump, he says things all the time. In practice, he's taken a very, for the most part, a pretty federalistic approach to this, and so that gives us. Not only does that help, make a important political precedent for political decentralization going forward, but it allows us to see, the fact that the sky is not falling in Georgia, that they're not having to store a mountain of bodies in the Georgia Dome because they allowed you to go to the barber or get a tattoo. The fact that Florida, which again is not opening up as fast as I would personally like, but Ron DeSantis was being attacked for being a grandma killer because in a state that is half retirement home as it is, we're not seeing this, and so the fact that we're actually we're able to compare different state approaches. I think that a lot of people are going to they're already recognizing this for what it is. And I think that going back to the importance of making people doubt the effectiveness of a technocratic government. I mean, the attacks going out there against Fauci, that the attacks going out there against the scientific consensus. I think all of these are very important for undermining a lot of the belief in the experts that so much of progressive policies that took over us in the 20th century were built on. And again, I think that this is I think the backlash here may end up being positive, in spite of, again, doing nothing to downplay the very real damage that we're seeing to people's livelihoods today and everything that's going to come going forward. Because again, the consequences of these policies are so bad.
Yeah, I watch Tucker on a fairly nightly basis for the most part, and he still surprises me in a good way. And again, there's some economic stuff that I would, push back on. But last night, he's actually had, and I can't even remember who it was on, but Tucker Carlson on Fox News, which for those of us like yourself and that have seen, Hannity over the decades, but here's a guy pushing back now against possibly licensing for barbers and stuff, realizing that, wait a second, if the state can control a business via licensing, then maybe that isn't a good idea after all, because we're seeing that that's one way for them to clamp down on hairdressers and whatnot. Well, we control your license, so we can pull it if we want. And it's almost brilliant how you see the awakening wave across media. Oh, well, not much media, but at least voices like Tucker.
No, absolutely. I mean, not only is he on Fox News prime time, I mean, he is now the highest rated name in cable news. And yes, I mean, nothing drives me crazier than when I see someone like Tucker Carlson or Steve Bannon or Pat Buchanan did the same thing back in the day, where they go out of their way to bash Austrian economics.
Yes,
because they conflate it with the Kochtopus, which just makes no sense. Right? I mean, that just drives me crazy because, again, like if Tucker Carlson read Rothbard, then I think that he'd recognize that a lot of these populist, trad conservative concerns about economic libertarianism in the skewed form that they see it would go away, right? Again, if you're talking about vulture capitalists and making valid critiques about the consequences of the financialization of the economy and its impacts on average people, you can't do that without a Rothbardian critique of the Fed, right? And so if Tucker Carlson just read a little bit of Roth on the Fed, I think you'd be right there. But it is great seeing these voices out there. And then going back to your earlier question about red pills, now, I remember back when Trump did a missile strike on Syria after the UN claims about a chemical gas attack from Assad's regime. I mean, you had Tucker Carlson out there, primetime Fox News, the night of these strikes, not only saying this isn't a good idea, but saying that this very much looks like a false flag.
Yes.
I mean, that right there, again, where you're not just criticizing the policy, but criticizing the institutions informing that policy, and really, because if the ramifications, the actual moral condemnation that you must have to suggest that this is a false event perpetrated by global elites. I mean, that is far more damning than simply saying, oh, like Amash did in his tweet, like, oh, the president has no authority.
Right.
Like, I agree with that, but you have to go beyond the constitutional authority and go to the incentives and the malfeasance of these people advocating these policies. And again, you had Massey and Tulsi and Tucker out there on mainstream outlets questioning whether this happened at all from the Assad regime. Like that, I think, is such a message that it's again, seeing on Fox News is absolutely remarkable. And again, like that's why there's plenty of reasons for optimism out there. That we shouldn't overlook, because it's so easy to see we're living in a nation of sheep that don't get it. People are waking up slowly but surely.
Before we go, I have to ask you, I know you're also a fan of Hermann Hoppe. Pitch to those that are listening that aren't familiar with his works the importance that he is to our movement.
For one, there's plenty of the thing is with someone like Hoffa that writes so broadly. There's plenty of stuff that you may disagree with that stuff, but I think that his refusal to bow down to the altar of political correctness. Our ideas are radical.
Right.
This is one thing I think libertarians don't get, is that we're so convinced of the common sense nature of our ideas that we think that if only we talk to enough people and we're reasonable, then we can feed them that you can have the best of blue and red if you simply join us. We're selling a very radical viewpoint. Justin Amash is concerned about the optics of armed protesters at the Michigan State Capitol. Consider the optics of suggesting that we should make serious cuts to social welfare programs or abolish public schools. Like those are far more radical to your average person, fairly mainstream libertarian positions than anything than a bunch of protesters out there. So the fact that Hoppe was always a very not looking to bow down for the approval of respectable opinion, I think is a good thing. I think a lot of his history is fascinating, but he's also not an economist. Like he's a philosopher first and foremost, and so so he's coming about things in a different way. There's a lot of continental European viewpoints that are interesting, and more important than not, I think that what you're seeing is his impact internationally, with his focus on tradition, with his focus on conservative social elements. When you look at the international libertarian movement, the growth, I think, the most successful movements are very Hoppian. They understand that we're not hyper individualists looking for liberty in this abstract sense. That we are looking for societies that allow us to flourish within a structure of family, within a structure of community. And I think that rejection of that hyper-individualism that so many libertarians fall for, never losing sight of that we're trying to create a good environment for all of us to live. I think that's something that is so often underappreciated. And I think that at the end of its day ends up being a lot. That I think is the concept that feeds into a lot of the disagreement on immigration, that feeds into a lot of his disagreements on cultural issues, that he's looking at things from a community standpoint. We should be striving for a community that respects liberty, and that requires acknowledging that there are people that disagree, that are actively hostile to that end goal of liberty, and that if we are wanting our ideas to actually be successful, we have to answer those questions that sometimes have answers that aren't nearly as black and white as we would like them to be. I think that he fills a great service there. And I think a lot of people, if you want to read a really good Hoffa book, his little talk, What Must Be Done, I think is an extraordinarily pragmatic strategy talk from someone who is a German philosopher living in Turkey. Like this is you can see why him and Rothbard were big buds, because it is remarkably practical for someone who can be very aloof in perception because he's living in a 5-star hotel in Bodrum. I think that's one piece of literature out there that I think anybody who's interested in the implementation of the idea side should definitely check out.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, his sense of community and that being important, that can actually push off some of the lightweight criticisms from people from the left that we're all, well, you guys are just a bunch of individualists. And I've seen it a lot during the last few months on social medias. Well, libertarians only care about themselves. They're individualists. All they care about is Ayn Rand. And I saw someone write something like, well, libertarians don't understand that their action affects others. There's a chain reaction, and it has all these consequences down the road. And I'm like, I wanted to go, are you kidding me? I mean, that literally is the free market system that we understand. Of course, we understand that one person's action can have unintended consequences down the road. That is economics in one lesson. But this person was speaking from a place of ignorance. But I do think that if we can push community-driven ideas amongst libertarianism, and this is what a society could look like. No, it's not a bunch of people living without roads in the middle of a field with guns by themselves. That's not the message. Unfortunately, it's been kind of cartoonized over the decades. Are you putting, I thought I had seen you mention something once about putting together almost like a red pill reader of sorts.
Yes. I'm still working on this project because I think there's so many. Again, we're living this age of social media, and like you have this very interesting dissident right movement, with there's elements of which that Richard Spencer is a complete idiot, right? But I think that you had a lot of young, particularly male Americans that were interested. And particularly fueled by like this larger mainstream news narrative. Oh, this is a dangerous thought criminal. Like, it's instead of engaging with his ideas in a forthright way and exposing exactly why he's so dumb. I mean, his entire view of white nationalism is literally homogenizing European culture into the color of all of our skin, which is absolutely insane. Like, this is. He came to Auburn. I got up and he was trying to make the case for eliminating college football, because for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that here's an example of you have a lot of white Southern boys that look up to black football players, and I'm sure that makes Richard Spencer's a skin crawl. But I'm pointing out the fact that look, I understand that you're a Yankee. And so, your culture is very different from mine as a proud-born Southerner. But you have to realize exactly like the importance that this has to family. That this creates a shared narrative that my family, is able to unite around. And like this shows how full of crap your entire ideology is and how superficial and dumb it is. And so, but the thing is, you have a lot of people out there questioning what's being taught. And I think that there's a lot of great works within Rothbard, within Mises, that reject a lot of this cultural left zeitgeist that's out there, that rejects this dream of egalitarianism, where how dare you suggest that a transsexual woman is different than a biological woman, right? They recognize this for the absurdity that it is. If we can take advantage of that skepticism of what they're taught in colleges and what they're taught by the media and highlight the way that our message answers these questions, and then more importantly than simply provides similar critiques on the absurdity of the modern left, here are the actual solutions to build the sort of civilization that you think that you want to build. I think it's powerful. Luckily, there's so many entertaining Rothbard articles out there. His strategy for the right, I think, is one of the best articles out there. Is egalitarianism as a revolt against nature.
Yes,
I think is a powerful work. Anatomy of the State, has often been described as like the red pill for anarcho-capitalism. And so I'm still working on this because I think that it's so important to be able to talk to this online community that rejects a lot of the mainstream. Rather than just simply dismissing them and let them follow down through very toxic, self-defeating, and at the end of the day, stupid rabbit holes. We need to be trying to reach out to them and guide them down the right path. I mean, Mises talked about how the most important thing we can do, in the battle of ideas is to communicate ways, that any sort of major political change begins with getting the public to understand the ideas necessary for a better society. We shouldn't simply be shunning these people because they have some ideas now that we don't like. We should be trying to reach out to them and win them over to our thinking. And I think that, again, the same thing that's true with Bernie Sanders supporters. I'm perfectly fine with people out there on the left, trying to focus on anti-war issues and the Fed and trying to win over Bernie Sanders supporters. I tend to think they're going to be less successal in that for a variety of reasons. That's fine. I think that's a good strategy. But trying to tap into some of the dissident right, because I have a lot of, there's a lot of similarities between some of the alliances that Rothbard had in the 90s.
Yes.
That's what I would like to try to do more of. So I gotta find ways to better take advantage of Twitch and TikTok and some of these. And I'm now 30 years old, and so I'm feeling like the boomer, not trying to catch up on where a lot of the good actions taking place. I remember when message boards were the big. That's where I found a lot of this stuff back in the day. So I gotta adapt with the times. But that's definitely something that I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
With the Institute.
That'll be the biggest step. It would be if it were me. Someone told me about, you got to get on TikTok. And I thought, I'm not even sure what that is. But before we go, anything to plug that you guys have put out, that any of your own your Twitter site, anything, your TikTok site, anything you can plug, go ahead.
I've actually just published, was actually able to get my name on an ebook that we're going to be printing soon. It was a collection of articles, kind of describing the global economic situation that we're in. It's called Anatomy of the Crash, in the 2020 financial crisis. The great thing about editing a book is that you don't actually have to spend a lot of time writing the content. A lot of it is just some of the best articles that I had read on the website at Mises.org, over the last few years. And there's a lot of great Austrian analysis of the environment that central banks and governments have created for us. So you can find that at Mises.org/crisis. Then you can find me on Twitter. I think half my content is simply retweeting Michael Malice stuff because he's just so good at that platform. But I'm on Twitter at Tho Bishop. Yeah, that's about all I got.
Excellent, man. Thank you so much for being here on Death to Tyrants. Tho Bishop, thanks, man.
Thanks for having me on. It's been great.
All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that. You're all red-pilled now. You have no excuse. Quit believing the craziness that you see just thrown out there by the media and probably some of the blue-pilled people and the institutions that Michael Malice calls the, all of these things that Michael Malice calls the cathedral. That involves quite a lot of dishonest people. Michael Malice puts it well and says, you become red-pilled when you see that the media is not biased, but they have an agenda. So think about that. All right, for us on Death to Tyrants, let me tell you where you can find us online. Facebook.com/Death to Tyrants podcast. Follow me on Twitter, @BuckRebel, BuckRebel. You can join the Libertarian Party using my link, lp.org/Death to Tyrants. As you kind of figured probably from this interview, we need more red-pilled libertarians out there. So you guys join. Let them know that my audience wants to take part in this and make a difference. And let me think. Oh, yeah, patreon.com/Death to Tyrants is where you can contribute to the show. I've loved this conversation with Tho. I hope you guys have as well. Until next week, have a great one.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram brass. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Death to Tyrants podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.